中央大学教授ロバート・モートン先生は幕末の日英関係史がご専門です。今回の展示7つの海を越えて開国前後の日本とイギリスの時代背景について、モートン先生の研究成果とともにリモートでお話を伺いました。
Hello, my name is Robert Morton, and I'm a historian who has written about some of the leading British figures in Japan during the crucial years of the end of the shogunate and the first 20 years or so of the emperor's government. So that starting in 1859 and carrying on into the 1880s. The Yokohama Archives of History has been very important to my research, and so I'm delighted to have been asked to contribute a few words to its YouTube site. So here is a poster of the current exhibition of the archives, Over the Seven Seas, which I think superbly illustrates the early relationship between Britain and Japan, bringing to life many of the people and events involved. My first book about this time was a biography of, in my opinion, the most attractive of the Britons who went to Japan at this time, A.B. Mitford, who was in Japan from 1866 to 1870. He was from an aristocratic family and took the classic upper-class British route to success, going to Eton and then Oxford, which still works, as the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson has shown. Mitford entered the diplomatic service from Oxford, and after serving at the Foreign Office in London, he served in Russia and China, and then became a secretary at the British legation in Japan. He was in the country for those critical years, the end of the shogunate and the beginning of the Meiji era. He wasn't a very significant figure in the history, but he was, I think, the best foreign writer about Japan at this time. He really brought Japan to life for British people, particularly through his book, Tales of Old Japan, which people still read. He became a big fan of Japan. Here he is describing how he fell in love with the country. Suddenly coming in full view of Mount Fuji, snow-capped, rearing its matchless cone heavenless in one gracefully curving slope from the sea level, I was caught by the fever of intoxication, a fever which burns to this day and will continue to burn in my veins to the end of my life. Actually, the truth is that he didn't like Japan very much at the start, but he certainly did come to love it. And this does truthfully describe his feelings about the country. By the way, I've shown a picture of Mount Fuji from Yokohama because this is where he saw it from. Obviously, Mount Fuji is absolutely unchanged since Mitford's time, but Yokohama is totally different. One of the most important ways in which the archives helped me to write the Mitford book was to give me a sense of what Yokohama was like when Mitford was living there, how it was laid out, and what the atmosphere was like in the place. Here's a map of early Yokohama, so 1860, so a little before Mitford's time. It looks very neat and clean. I don't think it was quite as neat as this. On the right-hand side, you've got the Japanese neighborhood. It's all very close together. On the left, you've got where the foreigners lived, and you've got some flags showing the different where the different nationalities lived. And then above them, you've got this lovely little path, and then you've got the Pleasure District, which is now where the Yokohama Baseball Stadium stands, and Yokohama Park. For me, a really invaluable source at the archives is the letters of Dr. Willis. He was a friend of Mitford's, and he wrote back to his family in Ireland, telling them all about what was happening. His letters are very amusing, frank, gossipy, and so they really are very useful for information about Mitford, and also for the other two figures I have written about, the first and second British ministers to Japan, Alcock and Parkes. So, messing up the order, I did Parkes before Alcock. So Alcock was the first British minister, but I did Parkes first. He was really a more important figure. He was minister for 18 years. As I think the picture of him shows on this book, he was a fiery and determined character. He skillfully managed Britain's response to the fall of the shogun and the Meiji Restoration. And he had a huge influence on Japan, being instrumental in providing the country with the expertise, the technical expertise to build its first railways, and also access to financing for that, and lighthouses and lots of other things. One of the most useful things at the archives for writing about Parkes is the Japan Punch. And this is a very nice cartoon that was put in Punch when he arrived. So they saw him as a mosquito sent by the British government to torment the potentates of the Far East. And we can see him buzzing from China looking extremely resentful, across the sea to Japan. He was viewed much more positively when he left. The British community was very sad to see him go. And it looks like Yokohama, she's not very happy either. So on the whole, people were sad to see him go, although I think he was such a demanding boss that I think that his staff at the legation were quite relieved when he left. Here's a lovely image of Parkes' residence in Yokohama. There are photographs of it, but this image, which is at the archives, is much the best representation of it, I think. So I've been continuing to use the archives for my present project, which is almost finished, a biography of Sir Rutherford Alcock. Like Mitford, he was another fan of Japan and the Japanese. I mean, he found it very stressful. So because he was there, he was the first minister, it was a time when Japan was very dangerous. There were lots of Ronin and samurai running around with swords, killing and attacking foreigners. So he said, with the danger of assassination, fire and earthquakes, he could not say his job was to be recommended for nervous people. However, he did have a high opinion of ordinary Japanese people. So here you can see he wrote, "They're a good-natured, kindly disposed, and inoffensive race, and I like them infinitely better than their brothers in China." He was also impressed by Japanese leaders, he comparing them to the Chinese again. They were a more resolute and determined race, as well as more astute, more fin, as my French colleague would say. So fin here means sophisticated, refined, stylish. He had some good times in Japan. One of them was he was in the first party to climb Mount Fuji, for foreigners to climb Mount Fuji. And when that party reached the top, the health of Her Most Gracious Majesty the Queen and of Mr. Rutherford Alcock and our absent friends in England were drunk in champagne. A salute of 21 guns fired with revolvers was fired and the British flag hoisted. 3 cheers were given, such as only an Englishman can give, and finally, God Save the Queen was sung. So, to finish, this is the wonderful book that the Yokohama Archives has produced to accompany the Britain-Japan exhibition. It has the best set of images to explain the relationship between the two countries I have seen anywhere. And I strongly recommend it to anybody at all interested in the topic. Thank you very much for listening.